Okay, hello everybody, and thank you for joining us for today's CMS Web Interface support call. During today's webinar, CMS will provide an overview of 2019 CMS Web Interface quality reporting for MIPS groups and ACOs. And after the webinar, CMS will take as many questions as time allows. And just before we begin, please note that today's call is being held entirely virtually due to the current situation, and speakers are not together. While we do not expect any difficulties with the presentation, please do bear with us if you experience any technical issues or delays on today's call. So now I'll turn it over to Sandra Adams-Slaughter from CMS to begin.
Thank you, Lauren. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today as ACOs and MIPS group practices prepare for CMS Web Interface quality reporting. I'm Sandra Adams-Slaughter from CMS. Joining me on the call today are other CMS experts and contractors who will share helpful information on CMS Web Interface quality reporting and answer your questions during the question and answer session after today's presentation. Today's call will only focus on quality reporting. You can contact the Quality Payment Program Service Center with any of your questions regarding cost, promoting interoperability, improvement activities, MIPS, or quality reporting in general. Next slide, please. This is a disclaimer slide about our presentation. Information in this presentation was current at the time it was published, but I urge you to please be sure you're using the source documents and links that are provided throughout the presentation, and please stay tuned to any communication from the Quality Payment Program, Medicare Shared Savings Program, ACO, or Next Generation ACO model regarding any updated information. Next slide, please. Thank you. Recording slides and transcripts for the January 22nd and March 4th support calls are now available on the Quality Payment Program webinar library. Please note that slides for the January 22nd support call were updated to correct an error identified on slide 13. Next slide, please. Please note the 2019 data submission deadline has been extended to April 30th, 2020. Your submission will automatically be accepted at submission close. As a reminder, the CMS Web Interface is accessible using the sign-in link on the Quality Payment Program website that is circled here. If possible, we encourage you to submit your 2019 MIPS performance period data in advance of the submission deadline of April 30th. Early submission will provide you with the time to receive assistance from the Quality Payment Program Service Center, have other CMS approved reason requests reviewed, and complete the CMS Web Interface reporting requirements. Next slide, please. Although the deadline for data submission has been extended, this will be the final CMS Web Interface support call. Submitters are encouraged to contact the Quality Payment Program with any questions during the remainder of the submission period, and to visit the Quality Payment Program webinar library to view the 2019 CMS Web Interface support calls, slides, transcripts, and recordings. Next slide, please. The other CMS approved reasons skip requests must be submitted through the CMS Web Interface. This is a way to skip a patient attributed to the measure during the denominator confirmation. The CMS approved reason is reserved for circumstances that are unique, unusual, and not covered by any of the denominator exclusions or denominator exceptions identified in the measure specification. Patients for whom a CMS approved reason is selected will be skipped, and another patient must be reported in their place for the measure if available. Once and other CMS approved reason is submitted, additional information may be requested from the submitter. If you have any questions regarding that status of your skip request, please contact qpp@cms.hhs.gov and include the skip request number in your inquiry. Next slide, please. Patients for whom other CMS approved reason is selected will be skipped, and another patient must be reported on in their place for the measure if available. When a skip request is denied, the patient will remain incomplete and the users must complete reporting for the patient. Please note that all decisions are based on information provided in the skip request. You should provide detailed information about why a patient should be skipped in your request. If multiple requests for additional detail are unanswered, the request will move forward in the review process using the information initially provided. Once a decision has been issued, the request cannot be reopened. We encourage you to submit the 2019 CMS approved reason request as soon as possible and no later than Friday, April 17th. Submitting after April 17th may cause your request not to be processed prior to the close of submission. Next slide, please. The 2019 CMS Web Interface API is available all year for testing and developer preview environment. You can review the resources listed on the slide for more information. Next slide, please. And now I will pass the webinar off to Angie Stevenson to go over frequently asked measure questions.
Hi, this is Angie from PIMS. Our first slide is our frequently asked questions for the CARE 2 measure. Is it acceptable to use fall risk documentation from any type of visit found within the EMR? For example, an emergency room visit or a visit to a specialist. The setting of the screening is not restricted to an office setting. The measure is not limited to a particular provider type. The measure allows a clinician with appropriate skills and experience to perform the screening. The next question, we have a patient who is a double leg amputee. Is this an exclusion for the CARE 2 falls measure for 2019? CARE 2 includes a denominator exclusion for patients who were assessed to be non-ambulatory at the most recent encounter during the measurement period. For example, patient is not ambulatory, bedridden, immobile, confined to chair, wheelchair, etc. The next question is if we are able to find documentation of the standing gait and balance being tested by having the patient march in place, as well as advance step and return each footstep backwards. Is this sufficient testing to meet the numerator? And a gait or balance assessment meets the intent of the measure. Screening for a future fall risk includes any assessment of whether an individual has experienced a fall or problems with gait or balance. A specific screening tool is not required for the measure. Next slide, please. This slide contains questions for the HTN measure. First question is, are blood pressures captured by a nurse or specialist accepted? Yes, the blood pressure may be taken by any clinician the organization considers qualified and for whom the eligible clinician or group clinically manages. Next question, if there is a HTN diagnosis in 2016 and no mention of it after that or about it being resolved, should that patient be confirmed in the denominator? The denominator confirmation requires a diagnosis of essential hypertension within the first 6 months of the measurement period or any time prior to the measurement period, but does not end before the start of the measurement period. If there's medical record documentation that supports the diagnosis of hypertension resolved prior to the start of the measurement period, 2019 would be January 1st, 2019. You would not confirm that patient for the denominator. However, if the diagnosis was active during the measurement period, you would confirm the diagnosis. And each organization is responsible for determining if their medical record documentation supports the appropriate diagnosis within the specified time frame. Next slide, please. First question on this slide is for the PREV-6 measure. How should we report PREV-6 if the patient refuses to have a colonoscopy or any other test such as FOBT? The answer is the PREV-6 measure does not allow a denominator exclusion or exception for patients who refuse colon cancer screenings. If the colon cancer screening for the patient is not current during the measurement period, you must report that the quality action was not performed. Next question is for PREV-7, the influenza immunization. If we have a patient who is in hospice, but CMS has pre-populated the flu shot in the sample, do we leave it as eligible since CMS has already found the vaccination? The answer to that is no. Since the hospice exclusion is at the patient confirmation level, you should select that option. So for the 2019 PREV-7 measure, this can be found on page 6 of the measure, posted measure specification. So you need to determine if the patient is qualified for sample, and the specs state if the patient is deceased in hospice, moved out of the country, or did not have fee-for-service Medicare as a primary payer, then you should select not qualified for sample and select the applicable reason from the provided drop-down menu and enter the date the patient became ineligible. Please note this guidance would be the same for all measures in the 2019 CMS Web Interface. Next slide, please. Our last question is for the PREV-13 measure. For denominator 2 population, some patients have the E78.00 pure hypercholesterolemia documented, and others have the E78.00 with hypercholesterolemia. If a patient has the code E78.00 hypercholesterolemia listed, but it does not say pure or familial, would this count for the denominator? The measure specification requires confirmation of pure or familial hypercholesterolemia. Using a combination of written documentation and applicable code is acceptable as long as it supports the appropriate diagnosis for the measure. Thank you very much, and I'll turn it over to Sandra Adams-Slaughter at CMS to present resources and where to go for help. Thanks.
Thank you, Angie. Next slide, please. Please note that the 2019 materials providing information on the MIPS quality performance category are available on the Quality Payment Program Resource Library. We encourage reviewing these resources if you have any questions on quality requirements and measures. We'll continue to communicate any future postings Additionally, the help and support page on the Quality Payment Program website contains links to materials such as videos, webinars, and online courses, as well as other items to help with reporting and development. Next slide, please. The Quality Payment Program webinar library also contains recordings, slides, and transcripts for past QPP webinars, including the recent 2019 CMS Web Interface user demonstration held in November and the CMS Web Interface kickoff webinar held last December. The recordings, slides, and transcripts for both January 15th through March 4th calls are also available at the library. Please note it may take 1 to 2 weeks to post presentations to the library following the webinar. Next slide, please. And you can go to the next slide. Finally, this slide contains links to resources available for the Medicare Shared Savings Program and the next generation ACO models. We encourage you to review the materials available. Next slide, please. And this slide will help you if you need additional assistance from CMS. Please refer to the contact information listed on this slide. Next slide, please. Help us to improve the quality payment program experience. Now, just before we head to the Q&A portion of this call, if you're interested in providing feedback and collaborating with CMS on the quality payment program, we encourage you to participate in our human-centered design efforts. To get involved, please email your name, title, topic of interest, and organization to qppuserresearch@cms.hhs.gov. And now I will hand things over to Ketchum to begin the Q&A.
Great, thank you, Sandra. All right, so now we'll start the Q&A portion of this webinar. If you haven't done so already, please submit any questions via the questions tab on your screen, or you can raise your hand that's on your go-to menu, and we will unmute your line if you'd like to ask any questions over the phone. So to begin, you have a question concerning Press 7, and it asks, is it acceptable for, that was just answered, it looks like, is it acceptable for a physician to write seasonal flu shot up to date without giving a specific date? The office visit is during the appropriate timeline.
Hi, this is Jamie with PIMS. Thanks so much for the question. I can't speak specifically to how you document or the language that you would use to document, but I can indicate that you just are going to have to make sure that that influenza immunization was given between August 1st of 2018 and March 31st of 2019. So hopefully that's helpful when you go to look through your medical records and how to approach this question. Thanks.
Okay, great. Next, would an MDI screening count? Okay, next would, go for it, Angie.
Okay, I'm sorry, I was getting a lot of static. You asked about the MDI screening count question, correct?
Yes, would an MDI screening count for screening for depression, for the PrEP 12 screening for depression measure?
Okay. The measure does not require a specified tool. It requires a standardized depression screening tool that is normalized and validated for the measure for the patient population in which it's being utilized. You can find the definition of the standardized depression screening tool on page 5 of the measure specifications, along with some examples of tools that can be used but are not limited to those tools. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, next, does the influenza measure require that the month be independently documented in the chart note? The guidance around this is confusing as the narrative spec and the verbal guidance do not appear to be aligned.
I appreciate this question as well. Thanks so much for submitting it. This is Jamie with PIMS. Again, as long as you can see the documentation that the flu shot was administered between August 1st, 2018 and March 31st of 2019, then that would suffice. And by all means, if you still need more help, just recommendation to reach out to the ServiceNow help desk. We'd be more than happy to help you get the answers that you need. Thanks.
Great, thank you. All right, just as a reminder, we do have the phone line open. So if you'd like to ask any questions to CMS over the phone, please do so by raising your little green hand icon, and we will go ahead and unmute your line. In the meantime, we've gotten a few questions about the deadline extension. So can you please clarify whether the deadline is also extended for NG-ACOs?
Hi, this is Lisa Marie. So the web interface deadline applies to all participants within the web interface. So the deadline is extended to April 30th. So it is for all those who utilize the web interface.
Great, thank you, Lisa Marie. All right, your next question asks, will there be bonus points available for completing the reporting within the original time period?
This is Lisa Marie. The bonus points, there's no extra bonus points if you submit your data before, let's say, March 31st. No, in our policies, we've never established a policy that way. We only have policies that relate to end-to-end bonus points or to the high priority measure, which only applies to ACOs. But other than that, there's no other bonus points.
Great, thank you. All right, your next question asks, if a patient is referred to hospice and enters into hospice, but then decides after a few weeks to opt out of hospice, should this patient be excluded? I can go ahead and repeat that. The question asks, if a patient is referred to hospice and therefore enters into hospice and then decides after a few weeks to opt out of hospice, should this patient be excluded?
Katie, would someone from your team be able to address that question?
This is Lisa Marie. We can certainly give it a shot. Basically, that is, again, at the patient confirmation level. And so those particular exclusions are if the event happens anytime during the measurement period. So I would anticipate that if a patient was in hospice during the 2019 program year, you would remove them at the patient confirmation level. We do know that there are cases where patients are removed from hospice, so it is possible that for the 2020 program year, that patient could be sampled again, and at that point in time, if they have not been in hospice in 2020, you would report on them. Thank you.
Great, thanks for that. All right, next, given the 30-day deadline extension, will additional CMS support calls be scheduled?
Hi.
Could you repeat that question? Sorry. Oh, Sandra, go ahead.
Yes, I was going to say that no additional support calls will be scheduled. If you have any questions, please send them to the Quality Payment Program Help Desk.
All right, next, can procedure code 82272 for the fecal occult blood test be used to satisfy Prep 6?
Hi, this is Olga from the PIMS team. The coding documents that are provided are considered to be all-inclusive for mapping to the CMS Web Interface. However, you do need to have medical record documentation that includes that the fecal occult blood test occurred during the measurement period.
Thanks for that. All right, your next question asks, the measure rates reported currently don't show any performance or bonus points for the measures submitted. Last year, it seems these points were shown after measures were submitted. When will people be able to see the performance points and bonus points earned on each measure on the CMS Web Interface?
Oslam or Laura, would you be able to address that question?
Hey, this is Laura. So once you complete all minimum required reporting for each measure, then you'll see the measure score for each of those, if you're a group or virtual group. And if you're an ACO, you'll need to navigate to the measure rates report with MIPS scoring to see the measure score.
Great, thank you. All right, next, can you please clarify what the final measures are that will be reporting only versus performance?
This is Kristen from RTI. For ACOs, the pay-for-reporting measures for all ACOs, regardless of performance year, are for Web Interface are MH1, Prev 10, Prev 12, and Prev 13. Thank you.
This is Lisa Marie, and those same measures apply in terms of those measures are not scored under MIPS. So for groups and virtual groups reporting via the web interface, you're not scored on those measures that Kristen just mentioned. And I just want to say, as long as you complete reporting for those measures, they won't be scored. And actually, yeah, so just make sure for all the measures in the web interface, just make sure that you complete reporting for all the measures.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification. All right, we're getting a few questions for additional help and support. So on the screen now is the QPP Service Center contact information. Please refer to it if you need it. Again, we do have our question line open. So if you'd like to ask any questions over the phone line, please do so now. You can indicate that by raising your hand on GoTo. If not, please do feel free to submit your questions through the questions tab on your screen. All right, so wait a few more minutes for questions to come in. Okay, wonderful. It looks like we have a question on the phone line by Jason Shropshire. So Jason, we've unmuted your line and you may go ahead.
Yes, I was just wondering, is there any information forthcoming regarding when the annual audits will take place? I know they typically come near the end of April. And as you can imagine, we're trying to schedule resources to do that amidst all the COVID work. So we really need to know if that's going to be delayed, postponed, canceled. Is there any information you have regarding that subject?
Hi, this is Aruna. Oh, go ahead, Aruna. So for the NGACO model, we don't have any updates on the quality audit at this time. We will share more information on the next steps for the audit in the near future. Thank you.
And this is Fiona from the Shared Savings Program. Exactly the same as what Aruna said. We don't have any updates yet.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. All right, we've had a few more questions come in the meantime. So regarding the hypertension measure, previous guidance provided indicated that patients must have at least one eligible encounter with the diagnosis of essential hypertension 1 year prior to the measure year or during the first 6 months of the measure year. Can you please clarify why this guidance isn't provided when there are questions related to the definition of active diagnosis?
So this is Deb from the PIMS team, and I'm just going to answer from the perspective of the measure itself. As you can see, that diagnosis of hypertension is an active diagnosis of hypertension that does not end before the start of the measurement period and during the first 6 months of the measurement period. So part of the providing patients within your sample is to give you enough folks that have that diagnosis of hypertension. And because that measure kind of is 6 months within the measurement period, because of course, if you don't have an active diagnosis of hypertension until, let's say, September of 2019, that particular patient would not be denominator eligible. So when you are looking for that active diagnosis, you are going to look for an active diagnosis that did not end before the start of the measurement period and did not start after 6 months, the first 6 months of the measurement period. I hope that helps. If not, please feel free to either clarify your question in the question and answer box or to submit a Quality Net help desk ticket. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. All right, your next question asks, how do I clear all data in the web interface to submit a fresh data set?
Hi, this is Aslam. You can delete previously reported data in CMS Web Interface in 3 ways. You can delete via the manual data entry page, Excel upload, or Web Interface API. So to delete data via manual data entry page, on the report Data page, select the beneficiary from the list by clicking on Edit Data next to the name of the beneficiary. This will take you to the manual data entry page for the selected beneficiary. And on the left rail beneficiary card, you will see a list with patients' ranked measures, followed by Choose Data to Delete link. Click this link and select Data to Delete, and then click on Delete Data button. Secondly, in order to delete any previously submitted data via Excel upload, in your Excel file, select NA from the drop-down for those fields that you'd like to delete data. Choosing NA will intentionally delete any data that was previously entered for that field. And lastly, previously submitted data can be deleted via Web Interface API by setting value to null for selected attributes. And attributes in this context are the individual measure questions. So if you're not using the Web Interface API, I guess our recommendation, the easiest way would be to download your Excel file with data and select NA for all the data previously entered or all the data that you would like to delete from the system, and then upload this new Excel file into the Web Interface. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that clarification. All right, next, can you please clarify if a fall screening was not done utilizing the fall screening protocol, but there is an assessment documented of the patient's gait, will that be acceptable?
Hi, this is Olga from the PIMS team. The measure specification does define a screening for future fall risk as an assessment of whether an individual has experienced a fall or problems with gait or balance. You don't need a specific screening tool. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, and just to repeat, if you do have any questions to ask over the phone line, please do raise your hand and we'll unmute your line. Otherwise, please feel free to submit any more questions to the questions box. And if no more questions come in after the next two we have, we can close out the webinar. But next, for Prev 7, if we have a refusal note from April 2019, would this meet the measure?
Hi, thanks for this question. This is Jamie with PIMS. I'm assuming that the refusal, the patient refusal, and in that case, yes, you can. That would meet the intent for the denominator exception that's present within the tool. So that should be okay.
And this is Deb. I would just further clarify, as long as the documentation that you're finding clearly ties back to the flu season in question. So the August of 2018 to end of March 2019.
Yep, thanks for that, Deb.
Great, thanks. All right, and finally, if documentation states that a patient is high risk for falls, would that be acceptable?
Hi, this is Olga from the PIMS team. So you would need to have documentation in the medical record of a fall risk screening as it's defined, and that can include the patient's history of falls, a described fall, a note stating no falls, or an assessment of gait or balance.
Okay, great, thanks for that. All right, so again, we'll just wait for a couple more minutes to see if any more questions come through, either the phone line or the questions tab. If you do have any final questions, please submit them now. And otherwise, you can always refer to the help and support as shown on the screen if you have any questions after this call. All right, Sandra, it looks like that's all the questions that we have for today. So if you'd like, we did just have one more come in requesting clarification on the hypertension measure. So can you just clarify a bit of confusion related to the active diagnosis? They're saying that the hypertension specifications indicate that any time prior to the measurement period, which seems separate to guidance stating that patients between 18 to 85 years of age who have a diagnosis of essential hypertension within the first 6 months of the measurement period or any time prior to the measurement period. So can you please clarify that?
I'm not 100% sure what else to clarify, as the last part of what you just read is that they have an active diagnosis within the first 6 months of the measurement period or any time prior to the measurement period. And I believe within the posted specification, there is also additional guidance that that diagnosis cannot end before the start of the measurement period. And that is just to ensure that the patients that you are submitting data on are patients that should be included in the denominator of the measure for the 2019 program year. So you wouldn't be held accountable to a blood pressure value in 2019 that's in control if the patient in 2019 did not have a diagnosis of hypertension. I certainly hope that helps. Again, if it doesn't, you can either readdress the question, raise your hand and ask it verbally if there's something I'm missing, or certainly submit a ServiceNow help desk question. Thank you.
All right, thanks for that. All right, and going back to the question on influenza, if the refusal was in April of 2019, would this not count?
So if the refusal was beyond the March 31st date, then it wouldn't count. Thanks for that clarification, Ingrid. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. All right, so now this does seem like these are all the questions that we have for today. Thank you to everybody who submitted any questions. And Sandra, we'll pass it back to you to conclude.
Thank you all for joining us today for the final 2019 CMS Web Interface support call. The slide deck, recording, and transcript from today's call will be available on the Quality Payment Program webinar library in the next 2 weeks. If you have any outstanding questions, please contact the Quality Payment Program Service Center at qpp@cms.hhs.gov. Thank you.